What's happening, folks? Welcome back to the 182 News Podcast. This is your host, Poppin Curbs, and we are at the end of Season 5. I need that Travis Barker drum roll. He did not reply to my DM. He did not reply to my inquiry about trying to get a specific drum roll for the podcast. I don't think it's going to happen. I got to tell you, at this point, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Blink is ever going to talk to me or acknowledge the podcast, and that's fine. It's okay. Everything's okay, folks. It's the end of Season 5, and as always, I want to thank you all for hanging out and for listening. I'm always very humbled every time I see the stats at the end of the year. It trips me out. I just saw the Spotify recap the other day. I think there was close to 700 folks who have me in their top 10 just on Spotify. It doesn't even count Apple, YouTube, the other places folks listen. I think there was over 60 to 70 countries where people are listening to this, and it's just crazy. I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for the support on this podcast. Every time we get to the end of a year, I always just kind of wonder in my head, like, man, do I keep this thing going? Like, I don't know. Is it something that folks want to keep listening to? Is it something that I want to commit to for another season? And at the end of the day, I've always said, as long as it's fun, I will continue doing it. And as of now, it does still fulfill a creative itch that I have. And I do appreciate, obviously, the engagement with you all and just friendships that I've made along the way. This is the end of Season 5. We will have to see if Season 6 is renewed. I think we'll be all right. I think we'll be in pretty good shape. But I really do want to thank you all, the support and the messages and the comments and all of that stuff. It really is what keeps me going. Looking back at this, it's just wild. I think back to when I launched this podcast, which is going on this is the end of Season 5, so it's 5 years at this point, going into the 6th, I guess, which is crazy. And I just look back, and in my head, the way I try to wrap my head around sometimes these little time blocks is like in 4-year increments. And I don't know why, but I always measure that up life-wise to like the time I had in college, like 4 years of college or like 4 years of high school. And I always think about, like, good Lord, how much I've grown physically, literally during high school, plus just like as a person in that time period. I mean, that's just a crazy amount of time that has passed. And to think that I've already surpassed that in just talking into a microphone about my favorite band is just trippy to think about. I didn't know from the beginning if anybody would listen to this. It was just truly something that I wanted to do out of passion and try to bring on rad guests and rad interviews and just share cool Blink conversations with you all. I half jokingly said from the get-go, I'd be stoked if my 2 chihuahuas listened. And just the fact that the podcast is growing more than ever. I saw the stat on Spotify. I think 56% of listeners last year were net new, which is insane. And it's like every time I feel like I should maybe wrap this thing up or close it out, it's you all that really keep me going, and I really appreciate it. Looking back, I just feel like I was just such a naive kid. I think about 2019 and that summer and just how excited I was about Nine and Blink and just life in general. I was in a really cool spot as far as age and career and stuff like that. And then it's just crazy to kind of reflect on that 5 years later. And this little podcast I have is still going, and I'm still chatting with you all, and Blink's in a really good spot. So it's just cool. So again, just want to thank you. This thing does really fulfill just some sort of weird creative itch that I have, whether it's editing videos or just telling stories or just chatting or whatever. It is something that I look forward to. And when I do it, I'm in the zone. I'm not checking my phone. My mind's not wandering. And it's just kind of, it's unique to have something like that. Whereas everything else in this world, I feel like I'm just getting yanked left and right, or can't concentrate, or just have too much shit going on. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening to the podcast and allowing me this space to do what I do, I guess, whatever whatever that is. I've been trying to do more YouTube videos. A couple seasons back, folks were just yelling at me to get video clips up or do more YouTube stuff. I made a conscious effort to try and increase my production on that side of things. And it's just so funny when I look back at some of the videos. They're just so terrible. I swear, like some of them I look at, I'm just like, God, these are so bad. But at the time, I was just so proud of them. And I think as far as a reflection goes on myself, just looking back, I mean, at least I think I'm seeing some growth in myself, either from an editing perspective or just the graphics or whatever. And it's kind of cool to look back and I'm embarrassed by it to an extent, but it's also cool to see some sort of growth and I guess personal accomplishment that I feel that at least I'm getting a tad bit better at some of this stuff, I think. That being said, it is nice sometimes just to sit down and talk into the microphone. That's how this thing started. That was the intent from day one. I never would have thought that I'd be doing either live interviews or video interviews. And I really try to go back and listen to some of those interviews and splice out certain sections that may translate better on video. However, there are some instances, especially on those early interviews, where it's just not translating well to video. There's one guy on the YouTube page, bless his heart, like every other month, he keeps asking me to post the Christopher Holmes full interview on video. And I have gone back and looked at that thing 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, I just can't. It's just not going to translate well. I was in the basement of my old house. I had no idea what I was doing. It does not translate well to video. My arm is like hanging around my neck awkwardly for 45 minutes of it. It's just not going to happen. So I'm trying to go back because looking back, there have been some rad conversations and some little moments throughout those interviews that may translate well on video and help kind of tell the story for the history books. But sometimes if I don't post it or share it, there's reasoning behind it, I promise. I just got done posting a couple from the Darren Doan interview, and I have clipped out one of his discussion points on the Josie music video, Damn It, as well as Eminem. So that's a good situation or scenario where it does make sense for me to go back and try to clip that out and, maybe even myself get reminded of what happened during that conversation. I always try to sort of mimic what I take in. That's part of what I want to do on the podcast always, is like, what would I want to listen to? That's why I started this thing, is like, I want to listen to people talk about Blink-182 and collectibles and just rad shit. So when I try to build videos or podcast episodes or ideas or whatever, it's that. I'm just trying to put together what I feel like I would want to listen to or watch to the best of my ability. And I appreciate that the audience out there, at least some of you, at least pretend to like it. So I really appreciate that. It's always this time of year. It's the one time that I will mention it. A lot of folks reach out and they say, how can I support the podcast? Do you have a Patreon? Stuff like that. The answer is always the same. I don't have a Patreon. I really, really appreciate that folks are willing to go above and beyond and try to support this thing. From day one, it's just been a hobby for me. I can't fathom how people make a living on YouTube or podcasts, to be honest. Like, it's insane. I think I've mentioned it before, but like, I think there's one of my videos that has 250,000 views or something. And I literally, just for the giggles, I look at it and it's like, I've made like 47 cents. I don't want to be the guy that pauses mid-video to try to sell you a mattress or boner pills or some stupid product I don't believe in. I always hate that when I listen to podcasts, so it's not going to be something that I want to pass along to you all. And thankfully, this isn't my career. It's just something that I do out of passion and just really as a hobby for the heck of it. So if you do want to support the podcast, this is that time of year where in the episode description, I will drop in just my Twitch donation link. And just know that anything you put in that or donate towards that is appreciated, and it will go towards hosting fees for the podcast. I pay monthly to host this thing, as well as just equipment or anything like that. I think I'm still trying to pay for this stupid ass MacBook that I record this stuff on. It's the only thing I do on this MacBook is GarageBand. So if you want to support the podcast, click on that link below, donate $1, $5, whatever you want, whatever you feel. At minimum, maybe it'll buy me a pack of gummy bears, actual gummy bears, not marijuana gummy bears. And I'll have one on you. I appreciate it. So I want to do this episode today, really kind of recapping what happened this year, because I was looking through and trying to think back of Jesus, what have I even done this year content wise? What have we talked about on the podcast? I want to kind of hit on some of the stuff that has happened throughout the past year, as well as some of the recent stuff to talk about. And then I'm going to close out this episode with my top 5 one more time songs, which I will say those are on the YouTube channel. I did do a video on that. So if you've watched that, it's the exact same. It hasn't changed in a week and a half, but it's okay. We'll go through that in case there's any listeners who haven't watched that. And then I'm going to reveal my top 5 albums of the year. This is something that every season of the podcast I keep saying I want to do, and I always forget. So I will hit on those when we get to the end. But to recap, just kind of going through some of the content and discussions we've had throughout this year, we kicked it off with one of my favorite bands, Driveways. And that is an interview that I'm very proud of. They did not do a bunch of interviews, still haven't, that I have seen. They just released a new EP called Tempest. I highly encourage you to check that out. I've seen some recent comments on that interview, so it seems like folks are discovering them and they're finding that interview and getting to know these bands. I appreciate these bands so much, especially some of these smaller ones that don't necessarily have the massive label backing or money or support or whatever. And part of what I want to do on the podcast, really moving forward, at least sprinkled in here and there, is just show more love to these bands that perhaps I have some sort of platform to introduce other folks to them. I feel that I owe it to them. When I hear music that speaks to me and just hits me that hard and just puts me in the zone, I want to share that with folks. I feel like that's my duty. And Drive Bands is one of those bands that when I listen to that music, it's just so good. It is so good. I don't do this for all the bands. I mean, 95% of bands that hit my radar or folks tell me to listen to, I do not like. I really don't. I'm picky about it. So when I find one that I like, I really want to try to at least show them some love in some capacity. I mean, these dudes, if you listen to October Forever or their recent EP, they are teachers and they're making amazing music and they're playing shows. So I hope you dug that one. That was a killer interview. I really enjoyed. After that, this is in January, there was an album that, spoiler alert, is going to show up very, very high in my albums of the year, and that is the Neck Deep album. It's self-titled. This album fucking rules. I absolutely love this. They basically returned to pop punk. On the YouTube page, I did a pretty good breakdown of really this album when it dropped and some of the history surrounding, I guess, band members in and out and really pushing it back into a pop punk direction. Their last album was a concept album, which I think is a masterpiece, but the sound was quite different. Check that out if you haven't. There are so many pop punk bands out there and bands that have tried to imitate Blink-182 for 25 fucking years. And Neck Deep has a way of doing it where it's not a ripoff. However, you can tell they were inspired by Blink in New Found Glory and have twisted it into their own fresh version of it. And it's authentic and it's not recycled and it's not trying to be Blink. It's just authentic 2024 pop punk. And I think this is really the best example recently that I can think of. If you like pop punk, put on this album, especially those first 5 tracks are just pop punk bangers. and blare it loudly. I love Neck Deep. Hoping to get Seb on the podcast to kind of talk some Neck Deep history and chat on that. But I was just so stoked when this album dropped. That was one of the things that I was looking forward to this past year for sure. After that, we had chatted with Thumbs, incredible artist who created a bass guitar for Mark Hoppus. Really rad dude. And again, one of the things that I think about when I think back to that conversation, there was something he said that I hope all of us can use in some capacity and try to implement it into your life or creations or work life or whatever. And he said something that he believes in: do what you want, do something that is authentic to you, and naturally others and like-minded others and individuals will naturally flock to it. So if you're a creator, do what you like, do what you want. I go back to that Christopher Holmes quote all the time: do what makes you happy and fuck everyone else. And if you're in a position where you can do that and truly live by that, that's amazing. A lot of folks aren't. I fall into that category. It's like, yeah, that sounds awesome on paper, but I also have a family to feed and bills to pay. And, I can't just not show up to work or not do this, not do that. But I think at least in the back of your mind, it's something cool to try to live by. I really enjoyed that conversation with Thumbs. And again, that quote just sticks out to me, especially for creative folks who listen to this or maybe are writing their own music or are inspired to do their own podcast or do their own video editing or whatever. Like, do what you love. And there will be other people out there who are just like you in some capacity and will listen or watch or whatever. And that's really, it hits home for me because it's kind of the premise of this podcast. I had no idea who would listen, but I just banked on somebody out there wanting to hear different side of like Blink history and collectibles and vinyl and talk about how my name is Mark pins and shit. Like, I figured somebody would. And this is really living proof of it in some level. So that was a rad one. And then it was kind of funny. I hit a spot here where for years, I was on a cycle of getting an episode out a month. Like, that was my goal. And it was almost like clockwork, like at the end of the month, I would be like, okay, I got to figure out something to get a podcast out on. And I really stuck with it. I didn't want to let anybody else down. I didn't want to let myself down. It was almost as if it was a challenge to an extent to come up with something creatively to talk about for 50 fucking minutes on a podcast, which is kind of hard to do. I think a lot of people may have this vision in their mind that podcasting can be so great and it's so easy. And I'm like, okay, people talk to me about it. Like, well, how do you do it? It can't be that bad, right? I'm like, okay, think about something you like and sit down and talk to yourself for an hour and a half. And if you're really good, try not to have to edit it at all to save yourself the pain in the ass of editing it afterwards. And then proof listen to it, and then post it, and then come up with a graphic, and then share it across. Hopefully you have some sort of social media that's built up in some capacity, and then pray to God at least 2 chihuahuas will listen. It's hard. And there was a 2 or 3 month break here. I just have it jotted down where I was looking through the dates, and I'm like, I didn't do anything for 2 months. And I will say I was just at a point really just with this and with just kind of my Blink fandom and just everything that was going on in my life where I just needed a break. And when I look back at that, I'm like, it's okay. Like, nobody yelled at me. I didn't feel bad. Like, I just needed a fucking break from my phone. I needed a break from trying to edit shit, from trying to get content out. And it wasn't just this, it was across other parts of my life as well. And I had set just a screen limit on my phone. I'm like, I don't even want to think about this shit right now. And I know after that 2 or 3 month break, I had some folks reaching out like, dude, are you alive? You good? I'm like, man, I'm just not feeling anything right now, And my takeaway looking back is like, it's cool. Like, if you need a break with shit, do it. It's all good, man. Like, take the time you need. People are still going to be there waiting for you for whatever you're doing. Nobody's going to skip a beat. There's different parts of my life and lessons I've learned along the way where it's like, even in my real career and other things, it's like you tend to think that maybe your job can't continue without you, or, you know, places would be screwed if you quit your job or whatever. And it's like, nah, stuff keeps moving. Like, that's how it works. And the machine doesn't stop. So I look at that little break that I had there, and it's something that I'm like, you know what? I just needed a little bit of time, really just to reignite either my passion for it or to figure out what I wanted to continue doing with this thing. And coming out of that, we did do a video on the Blink-182 tattoos. That's something that was cool. I always want to try to bring this stuff back to you all and the listeners. Like, I get sick of hearing myself talk about this stuff sometimes. It's like, I want to see what you all are up to. What are your creations? What's your Blink stories? You know, what's your favorite collectibles? And I thought that tattoo video was really cool. I asked for submissions. I always love seeing these either in person or just photos on Instagram or whatever. When you get blasted with a tattoo like that, man, I mean, I think that's the ultimate like show of passion for a band or a lyric or, you know, an album. It's always very interesting to me to see how people end up designing something or picking a particular lyric that means the world to them. I thought that was awesome. It also reminded me that I had promised a second volume of that. I had submissions for it, and I have yet to put that video together. So coming into 2025, one of my goals next year is to get that tattoo volume 2 video up. And even if nobody fucking watches it, I don't care. It's going to be rad. And if somebody looks up tattoos for Blink and they want to get some inspiration for their own or see what's out there, whether it's to get ideas or to ensure they don't copy somebody, I'm going to post it, and we'll go from there. We then started getting some tour dates with Blink. So Blink throughout this time was getting ready to go back out on the official One More Time tour. Alongside that, Travis was doing some meet and greets, had a great convo with a dude, Zach, who attended a meet and greet. And this is one of those conversations that it's just super cool for me to hear how excited folks are when they get to meet their heroes. And I know there are questions surrounding meet and greets, and you may think it's stupid and it's too expensive and all this. I get it. Believe me, we can go down that road. We can have that conversation. If you are of the opinion that you don't want to pay to meet anybody or it's ridiculous, I get it. I can totally understand that. However, if you're somebody who's loved Travis or Blink and Mark forever and you want to meet them and you want to have a guaranteed chance to meet them, paid meet and greets are typically the way to go about that. I usually don't mind. Now, this one was too pricey for me, unfortunately. I don't mind typically because I like supporting the bands, especially if it's a smaller band that needs the money from a meet and greet or it's a smaller tour. But I also like it to avoid the awkwardness of trying to run into them or hanging by the bus or venue afterwards. Like, I'm not doing that shit at this age. So for me to have an opportunity to just get a guaranteed meeting, guaranteed photo, guaranteed autograph, I think it's probably the way to go to avoid the awkwardness of waiting or praying that you run into Travis running down the street, run Travis run, and then hoping that he snaps a picture with you at the finish line or something. So I thought that was cool to hear that a lot of the folks that met with Travis had a unique meet and greet experience. They were getting tattoos, they were getting to chat with Travis, and as always, I will say, at least Travis offered the opportunity. He didn't have to do that. You know, it's not something that folks have to do. I mean, if you're a band and you don't want to meet your fans, then just don't. You don't have to. It's always fascinating to me on these meet and greet videos and arguments that people get in. It's like, if the band members are so miserable meeting people, just fucking don't meet people. You don't have to. But if you're in a position when you're a smaller band and you need the meet and greet money, then give the fans a good experience. Like, smile, shake their hand, take a picture. It's a lifetime memory that they are going to have. Honestly, for a lot of folks, like a core memory. I mean, if I think back to like my best 25 memories, I guarantee you meeting Blink in 2017 and 2016 are right up there. I don't even give a fuck how much I had to spend, how dumb I looked, how awkward I looked. It was just rad. So at least folks had a chance to get out there and meet Travis. You know, if it was $200, it would sell out in 5 seconds and people would be pissed. If it was $100, there'd be 2,000 people trying to do it and there's not enough time in the day to pull it off. So there's always reasonings behind shit. It just is what it is. But I'm going to choose to be happy for Zach and all the folks that got to kick it with Travis for a minute and have that guaranteed interaction. At this point, Blink was out on tour, and part of my question was going to be like, yo, what's the set list look like? Like, what are we going to be hearing? The year prior, we were hearing Edging, we heard More Than You Know, we were getting Turpentine. But this being the official One More Time tour, more or less, I was hoping to get some more material from the new album, and we did. And in fact, we also got a new song, which shocked me, first night of the tour, which was Can't Go Back. That was rad. And even more shocking than that, we were getting a Plus 44 and Boxcar Racer melody, which is absolutely insane. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, would they play Boxcar Racer or a Plus 44 song, I would say there is no fucking chance. And I think that just shows that Blink is in such a good spot as far as just being friends and cool amongst each other and appreciative of their differences throughout the past 30 years and supportive of the side projects and everything that has happened along the way. It's really pretty crazy. I was thinking about this. There was something I was talking about. I want to say I was talking about See You and how I think it sounds similar to Dogs Eating Dogs. And one of the things that I was thinking about is, wow, this version of the band is probably the most friendly amongst each other since 99 or 2000. Because getting into 2001 with Take Off Your Pants and Jacket, that is really when the band first started to have some tension, probably amongst Tom and Mark, is my take. When it comes to songwriting, when it comes to creativity, things like that. I mean, this is mentioned in the liner notes of one of the Toy Page vinyls by Mark. Vinyl. I can't believe I said vinyls. I see so many people saying vinyls now that I think it's like converting me. It's vinyl. The plural is vinyl, but it doesn't matter. I feel like vinyl's just fucking dead at this point. I think cassettes are the new vinyl. Vinyl was cool like 7 or 8 years ago when I wasn't buying no physical music at all. CDs had died off long ago, and finally vinyl made a comeback, huge art, and it was like $15 to $20. And I was thinking, okay, I'll pay $15 to $20 and feel like I'm supporting this band as opposed to just streaming through Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. And then now all of the vinyl are like $50 fucking dollars. And it's just like, man, I'm not buying all these. I can't variant collect all of these to just sit on my shelf. I still very much appreciate the large artwork, but I think gone are the days are me trying to get all of the different variants on these because it's just too expensive. It's crazy. So I think everything's going to turn back around to cassettes, and those at least take up less space. Theoretically should be cheaper. Still kind of rad, but I don't know. That's my take on vinyl. So it's really interesting thinking about Blink now and really just where we've been the past 23, 24 years. You know, they broke up forever. They get back with the reunion. You can argue whether or not that was, I guess, true friendship or just rekindled because of Travis's accident. Some would argue that Tom was more invested in Angels and Airwaves during that time period or more worried about mod life or his own ventures. But I feel like we're truly at a spot now where the band is just really good friends, joking amongst each other, and especially creatively in a spot where anything can go. I mean, they can do any type of sound they want to. They're not going to be stuck in a specific type of sound or vibe. I think we just saw that in One More Time Part 2. Those songs are just all over the place as far as vibes and sounds and all of that stuff goes. So on this tour, I was able to catch 2 shows. There was one in Kentucky, which I believe is their first and only show in Kentucky to date, which is mind-boggling, even as far as festivals go and that type of thing. And then again, the next night in Indianapolis, that was a really special show for me. I grew up a huge Pacers fan, NBA basketball. And I've been to that place just so many times as a fan, watching my favorite players out there, and trips with my dad and family, and I just love going to that place. I mean, it feels like a second home for me when I'm there. And to be able to see Blink there, and just the same amount of people that are watching an NBA game, watching this crappy punk rock band, their words, not mine, was just mind-boggling. You know, I'm watching Blink, and I'm looking up and I'm seeing Pacers banners, and I'm just thinking about all the different spots I've sat in that arena with friends or family. And I'm just right here in front of my favorite band playing new songs. They sounded amazing. I got to kick it with Mark a little bit before that show, so that was cool, just kicking it in the back, seeing them. I mean, at that show, I was standing next to Tom and Mark, like watching the openers, which was just an insane experience. So forever grateful for this recent tour and that show in particular. I still can't pinpoint it, but I feel like these recent shows were so much better than the year prior, and I don't know why. I mentioned that, I think right after this show, I did a podcast talking about it. I feel like it had to be the set list just getting switched up a little bit, because there weren't too many differences. I mean, the stage setup was similar. There weren't a lot of things going on behind them, but I also loved that. Like Skankin' Rabbit was an inflatable coming up behind them. This was the big reunion tour. I feel like, I mean, I think the 23 tour was more or less just a celebration of the band and Tom being back. And maybe this one being specific to a new album and album cycle is why I just enjoyed it so much more. I don't know, but rad nonetheless. I was supposed to see them the following weekend to round out the third and final show for me this year, and unfortunately they had to cancel. And part of what my takeaway was, just kind of talking to some of the folks that I know behind the scenes, is like, they have a lot of shows. Like, I'm shocked they didn't have to cancel more. And I know they don't take it lightly, and it sucks, and Tom was sick, but I'm just thinking about how many shows these dudes have played, and it's just insane. And Mark has even said, of course, you know, they're traveling and doing this as luxurious and quote unquote easy as humanly possible for a band, and it's still hard. And I just, you know, the older I get, especially when it comes to being away from family or just the travel, I mean, if I have to drive away for 2 fucking hours and get a hotel and come back, like, I am wiped. It wipes me out. If I have to fly somewhere, I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine, you know, all these folks playing a show, unpacking everything, driving to a city overnight. You get into the hotel 3, 4 a.m., you sleep until maybe 8, 9, and then you got to go set up and do the whole damn thing again. It's a crazy, crazy life. And obviously very grateful that they're out, especially at their age, getting up there a little bit, out and all over, so that folks even overseas and Mexico and all over can catch these dudes performing. But, you know, my takeaway on it was like, man, that seemed like a really gnarly tour, and I'm really glad that they're finally able to get a break right now. During that, you know, we kept hearing that the new deluxe album or bonus album, whatever it was going to be dubbed, was coming out in August. So that was rad over the summer to have something to look forward to. Other notes that I had of just throughout the year, I did go catch New Found Glory. It was awesome to be able to really listen and watch them celebrate Catalyst, 20 years of that album. That's one of my favorite New Found Glory albums. So to be able to kick it with Ian, say what up, you know, hang out with the dudes, it was awesome. Like, very, very grateful for my friendship with Ian. Ever since he came on the podcast, just one of the nicest dudes. I talk to him every day. Couldn't be more kinder, and I'm just really appreciative of him answering my message for a podcast interview 2 years ago or whatever. I mean, these dudes get hit up all the time, constantly just ignoring DMs or declining them, and it's something that I hate asking. I really, really do, because I know it's fucking annoying. I mean, and I hate to be that guy, but Ian, I think he saw the early Blink kind of knowledge or excitement that I had, and felt like he could add something to the podcast and just do it as a kindness to me, out of kindness to me. And the fact that he came on and was able to share some of those rad early stories was awesome. And I'm very grateful for his friendship and newfound glory at this point. So I hope folks had a chance to go out and catch those shows. I don't know if they've announced anything that's coming up this next year. But throughout that, what's cool about them is their guitarist, Dan, who has been playing with them for a couple years now, he is in 4 Years Strong. So it's really opened up like my ears and interest to even some of his music and just different bands along the way. So it's kind of cool just to think about. I had the Rock Show van interview with Andrew, really kind dude who was restoring the Rock Show van. I really enjoyed chatting with that, and it's interesting when I think back to that conversation. Still, the thing that sticks out to me more than anything is the time that he gets with his dad. And that's something that, of all the things we talked about, Blink fandom, tracking the truck down, restoring it, the band being somewhat aware of it, I still think that the most important part of that whole conversation and project for him is that time that he's getting with his dad working on restoring that. Again, it's just moments like that. It's memories that without this band probably don't happen in some capacity. It's really trippy to think about. Like when I think about Blink, there are so many friendships and memories and trips and just rad things, even way outside the music, that just would not happen without this band existing and creating and just being the rad punk rock skaters that wanted to come up and make a band. Like, it's crazy all of the different effects that just those three dudes jamming have had on all of our lives, even to this day, which is pretty nuts. So I know the Rock Show van, he was trying to take that to, I think, one of the shows I was going to be at. I was hoping to see it. However, I don't think they could make it. And then there was a festival that they took the van to, and it was like right next to the stage. And I was really hoping the band was going to go pop in there and take a look at it. I don't think they had a chance to. When it comes to festivals, like, I feel like festivals, even though it may seem nice on the outside, if you're going, like, I feel like they're just so busy. Nobody's cell phone works. It's such a shit show. You're running into a million people backstage who want to talk to you or hang out or haven't seen you. A lot of times you have bands who are just in and immediately out because of that. So I don't think they had a chance to kick it in the van, unfortunately. But I'm still always trying to follow like what's going on with that van and where it's going, because I hope to sit in it one day. Maybe record a podcast live from the Rock Show van. That'd be nuts. I did a deep dive on Enema of the State. That's one of the episodes that I hope folks can go back and listen to even 10, 15 years from now. And just as a standalone deep dive into Enema, get some information and some history. I'm always kind of torn on this stuff where it's like, I don't know if people want to listen to it. I don't know if people want to watch it. I don't know if people want to listen to it and then watch the exact version of it ripped to video. So I kind of split these up. Sometimes I do videos, sometimes I do podcasts, and I'm just doing my best and always open to feedback. And I appreciate you kicking it with me wherever you're finding me. Around that time, and I had forgotten about this, there was some writer out there who had ranked Enema of the State, and I never fall for this, but I think he had Dumpweed or something at like 10 or 11 on the album. And I just remember thinking, there is no fucking world where Dumpweed is number 10 and I'm going to have to rank these. So I did an episode ranking the Enema of the State songs from worst to best or whatever, just to set the record straight on that one. And it was pretty much just your opinion, man. I left that Easter egg in there. That's from The Big Lebowski. A couple people messaged me and got it right. After that, there was a Stingray video that I had put together about marks for Ernie Ball Music Mans throughout the 90s. And that one was a rad one. I always enjoy just digging into the history of the guitars. I'm not a gearhead. I think folks know that. But I more or less care about I guess, the look and the history surrounding them and what songs and videos they were used on, that type of shit. If you start asking me about tuners or pickups and bridges, I don't know. But I like digging into these as far as the history goes whenever I can. Similar to that, I had put out a video on what I think is the most important bass from the California era. It's probably tough to argue against, really, would be that Crayola bass. And that's a very special bass. That was a gift from Robert, former bass tech, who has passed away, and Sky, that they delivered to Mark while he was interviewing the artist, Greg, who goes by Crayola. And it was a surprise to Mark. And really that kicked off the Jaguar era for Mark. And it was just really interesting to go back and kind of listen to Mark getting surprised by that. I thought that was a cool video to put together. California was tracked with that. Deluxe tracked with that. I think 9 was mostly tracked with that. So very important bass in Blink's history. Greg, the artist, side note, he caught wind of that video and had reached out to me. He sent me a signed pin, which was really rad of him. Just very appreciative of him doing that. You know, a lot of times creators, myself included, you know, we pour a lot of time and effort into this stuff, and you kind of put it out there and it is what it is. You don't necessarily expect or get anything in return. But to have an actual artist like that be like, dude, thank you for putting together that video. That was rad. I really appreciate it. Here, shoot me your address and I'm going to send you this. That was a nice little surprise. The next thing, probably the highlight of the year, honestly, for me, was the bass guitar that I had gifted to Seb Barlow of Neck Deep. Really cool video. I'm biased, obviously, but of all the ones that I put out this year, this is the one that probably meant the most to me. Alan Corona, who you all should know by now, bass making extraordinaire. I can't even say it. Alan Corona, the bass making extraordinaire. Need to trademark that. I've got to be the only person on the planet who calls him that. I've just been calling him that since day one on the podcast, and I think it's funny at this point. It's just kind of like a running joke. It's accurate. It's just a lot to say when you introduce somebody. The bass making extraordinaire, Monsieur Corona. He and myself, he worked with me and I scrambled to make this happen last minute and put together a bass that I wanted to gift to Seb, who's the bass player and longtime producer of Neck Deep. And it was really just something that, like a lot of things on this podcast, I woke up one day and it was just stuck in my head. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to do something rad for Neck Deep. I appreciate their music. They get me through a lot of days. I like listening to all their different albums and eras. And I had started digging into the history of it and documenting it. Some of you may follow. There's a Neck Deep news page that I started a couple years ago, really just to start documenting all of the collectibles and all that shit. It's something that I've done for years in Blink, and when I started to try and translate that to a different band, I'm like, yo, there is not much information out there. I want to try and help that just for this, you know, for the hell of it, along with for future Neck Deep fans or current Neck Deep fans to be able to find this information, or 10, 15 years from now, if somebody wants to figure out, like, what is this Rain in July cassette? How rare is it? Blah, blah, blah. My hope is, just like all of this Blink stuff that I try to do, is it's kind of timeless from a research perspective, and at some point folks can dig into it if they want to, and the information will be laid out. So long story short there, watch the video if you haven't. Totally customize a bass for him, went to a meet and greet and basically handed it over, and shockingly he played it that night, and since then has played it at every single show. They were just out supporting Sum 41 on their final tour in Europe, which is insane. And they had a shortened set, and he plays it the entire set, which is just fucking crazy. So when I look up all these YouTube videos and just watch Neck Deep and I see that bass, I'm just tripping out. Like, it's honestly surreal. So definitely check that out if you haven't. Huge shout out to the bass making extraordinaire, Monsieur Alan Corona. for working with me on that on such a shortened timeline. I think we had like a month to put it together, which is insane. The last episode that dropped, as far as the podcast goes, was California Deluxe versus One More Time. And I was really just curious to go track by track. And I have such fond memories of the California era and California Deluxe era. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. That 2019 and like really 2016 through 2019 summers were just like some of the best times for me. It's like you're in a good spot in your life. You know, I had finally kind of gotten like a real job and I just gotten married, and you're still just kind of on the up and up as far as like trying to work hard and make money, and you get your first house. It's just an exciting time. You know, we just found out we were having our first kid, and just have such fond memories of just being so excited during that time period. And to me, you know, at that time, I'm still just like a naive fan. Like Blink is still just everything and just magic and special. And, you know, shortly after that, we have COVID. At that point, I had launched the podcast, and it's just, I don't know, it's just different. Like when I think about it now, it's just really different. I've thought about that recently. I'm like, man, there's times where if I could go back to just being like a naive fan, and even if it means throwing away the podcast or whatever, like I feel like I would. Like if I could go back to 2019 summer, I feel like I would, which is crazy. And I understand for some folks, maybe you didn't like that era the most or truly didn't enjoy the music. So I get it. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. We know where we are at this point. So it's fine, I think, when you look back on it, even if you disliked it. But yeah, I don't know. It's just weird. Like when I think about it. So coming into Deluxe, I knew I would be biased. Like I knew when it comes to California Deluxe versus One More Time Part 2, Deluxe might take some of these. And when I put those side by side, it was really interesting as an exercise, and it ended up being an exact tie, which is really probably the best possible outcome, maybe the most predictable outcome. Because for me, I genuinely enjoyed that music and loved that time period with the band. Obviously, I think anybody, if you ask them, would say you prefer Tom and Blink, you prefer the dudes getting along, new album. Like, of course, no shit. Like nobody's gonna say that. Nobody would oppose that. I mean, of course, this is this current state of the band that I would want. However, when I think back to it, it's almost like, man, those time periods were pretty rad. Like, yeah, of course you're happy that the band's playing arenas in Fenway Park, but it was also really rad to see like really small shows and smaller shows and amphitheaters, and to have meet and greets and sound checks and shit like that. And just to be a naive fan, from my perspective, not even beginning to think about what I would talk about in a podcast. Or I've heard people mention it before. It's like, once you put on like a producer's hat or like a creative hat, and again, I'm not trying to say that I am that at all. I genuinely feel like I'm one of the worst podcasters on Spotify. But that being said, once you kind of put that on and start thinking in that, I guess, frame of mind, it can be difficult to turn off. Like even when I don't want to be doing the podcast or don't want to be creating, I just want to watch a fucking movie or read a book or not even think about anything, like I can't help it, which is a detriment at times. Like it sucks sometimes. Even today, like I'm off today. I think in a perfect world, I probably would have just like watched Lord of the Rings, like played a video game, and I've edited 2 videos, 3 videos. I'm doing a podcast and recorded another video. Like, I don't know. I just can't turn it off sometimes. And that's a long way of saying that going back to 2019, it just seemed like a little bit of a simpler time for me personally, which I think some of the bias comes into play there. As well as when I reflect back on the band and maybe the accessibility and that type of thing, there's a part of me that just as a genuine fan, I appreciated those times. So that was a really interesting one. And I was kind of surprised. I thought most folks in the comments would be like, yo, you're a fucking idiot. Calibot, it's One More Time Part 2 easily. But there was actually a lot of folks who reached out and were like, yeah, this is quite a bit closer than I had thought it would be. That's really where we had wrapped up content-wise, which is a lot. Like, I did not know how much I had done this last year until I sat down and looked at it. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is ridiculous. Like, what are you doing with your life? But that being said, it was fun. Like, I'm always trying to, I guess, kind of one up myself on just what I'm putting out there or fun conversations or whatever. So now we get a chance to transition into some of the current things. Really, the two big things to hit on as far as announcements go. One is Mark's book. I feel like we hit on that, maybe not, but Fahrenheit 182, his book is dropping in April 2025. Cannot wait for that. I think people had begged Mark forever to put out a book. He was hesitant to do so, flat out said at some points, like, not happening, not in the works. And there just happened to be a perfect scenario between, I think, the downtime and then the cancer scare and all that stuff, where he felt like it was a good time to write and did so. That was a cool time period. I was talking to Mark a lot during that time period. I know he was working hard on that. So I can't wait to read that whenever that drops. And I'm sure we'll have some conversations surrounding that. Maybe, because I'm sure press will increase by then, maybe Mark will chat on the podcast about that at some point. I will bother him eventually. I always hate doing that, but at the same time, as just a fan, there's also a little bit of me that's like, man, I wish the band would come on. Like, somebody, come on. Who wants to come on first? Travis's book was amazing. I'm sure Mark's will be just as good. And of all the books that Tom has written or co-written or whatever, man, I wish Tom would write a book. Like, Tom is a unique, funny motherfucker, and I wish he would write a book because I feel like it would be such a good read and just such a unique perspective. Maybe that's something that To the Stars can kind of nudge him on and get that going. As far as the other net new thing that I wanted to talk about, the Padre guitar, which I'd put out a video on when To the Stars announced it. Tom's Fender guitars have been dropping kind of sporadically. There was like the original Strats, and then there was the Starcasters. I went to Guitar Center last week or the week before, just hoping to see a Starcaster, and as well as Mark's bass. Those are kind of the two new things from Fender we had gotten, and they didn't have them. I even checked another local music store, didn't have them. I know they're widely available online, but I just wanted to see the damn things and hold it and strum it a little bit. They're expensive, so it's not something that I can just buy as a toy. And, you know, I've mentioned it prior, but my hands, unfortunately, I think it's a combo of like carpal tunnel and tendonitis, and it's a long way of saying that my thumbs just don't work right. And unfortunately, one of the worst things I can do for it is use a keyboard or play guitar or like play video games. That's when it really just kind of spasms out, which sucks. So I cannot strum away and palm mute as much as I would hope, but such is life. The new guitar that To the Stars had dropped is the Padre guitar. And this is the one that is brown with the orange racing stripe. And there were a series of unique colorways that To the Stars had dropped exclusively. There was the all black one, kind of the matte black was the first one. That one was sick. I think a lot of folks thought maybe it was too similar to like the Jim Root looking Fender. I'm a sucker for just like a black axe with a black pick guard, so I thought it was gnarly. However, couldn't pick it up at the time. They then dropped a white one that they were calling the Yeti. That one did not do as well, but what's crazy about it is that ends up making it more rare and probably more valuable down the road. But there was an all white one. And then the most recent one, I knew there were 3 coming, but I didn't know the colorways yet. That was part of why I was a little hesitant to jump on one of the first 2, because I was like, what's going to be the sickest one? I think they had learned a little bit from the white one and thankfully had went with really an official colorway that he had played at some point. When you get into some of these axes, it's just the fact that Tom, you know, actually played one of these, and there's videos and photos of him playing one of these on stage. It just really increases how much folks want them. So the ability to do that, I think, is super sick. They released this one. It had a custom orange case, which was accurate. I know Stefan from Gear 182, who's been on the podcast, he owns Padre 2, the actual one that Tom was using back in 02-ish. And I know he had sent them pictures of the case in order to kind of help make this replica as accurate as possible. I thought this would be a bloodbath when it went on sale. Black Friday, there were going to be 300 available. One of the big selling points to me is they were going to be numbered on the back, which is sick. Signed certificate, which is fine. And then the case itself, this one had a higher price point. I want to say it was $17.50, which is up there. Like, that's a lot for a made in Mexico Strat. However, basically being just a custom build, and really a high dollar collectible in my mind, I jumped on it and I thought they would go pretty quick. They did end up selling out. It just took a little bit longer. I think right before Christmas, it's a tough sell. I mean, it's a lot of money. I mean, I had to sell a bunch of crap to try and cover it right before Christmas. But whenever that finally gets in, I think it's expected in June. I'll be stoked to post some pictures, hopefully do a video on that. Looked pretty rad. When it comes to, I guess, iconic strats, I think I would personally prefer the black Boxcar Racer one over that with the white stripe. However, who knows if and when they're going to do more colorways. Being as this one sold out, maybe we'll get more down the road, but it was just one of those things where it's like, I'm not gonna pass this up. And even, God forbid, if you bought one and end up having to sell it down the road, it's something that I think would probably hold its value as an investment or just a collectible to pass along. So I thought those were sick. I cannot wait to get that in hand. And I'll be stoked to kind of show that one off whenever it arrives. One of the things I got some comments on, obviously I've done a lot of stuff on the sticker strat alongside the sticker strat crew. So always down to chat about that axe. And one of the things that people were asking or mentioning was like, gosh, I wish they'd do the sticker strat. I wish they'd do a white strat with like that sticker pack or whatever. I will say, and I don't think I've mentioned this prior, but when I talked to Tom last summer, we were talking about the sticker strat, and he said that Fender was working on a white Fender strat with a sticker pack to kind of go along with it. Now, where that is at now, or if it already died off, I do not know, but that was straight from Tom to me. So obviously I feel like I have some reason to believe in it in some capacity. I think there would probably be difficulties getting all of the stickers approved by the bands, but To the Stars did it on the little miniature, on the little mini guitar. That's still one of my favorite things ever. So maybe one day, and Tom and his camp and those dudes, I mean, they know how to get a hold of us if they need assistance with the stickers or the colors or placements or whatever. So that'd be fucking awesome. If I have to sell Padre 2 down the line to pay for an actual sticker strat replica, I will be stoked to do so and happy to do so. I know a lot of folks were bitching about the inlays missing on the Padre replica. I knew that wasn't going to happen. I mean, that's just not going to happen. Unfortunately, yeah, it'd be rad. But the price would probably increase to $2,500, $3,000. You'd probably have to wait a year, 2 years. Who knows? I mean, I don't think logistically it was going to be possible to pull off, unfortunately, but that's something to look forward to. Looking ahead just a little bit, and then I will end up really kind of honing out this episode with top 5 songs and top 5 albums, but I still want this Angels and Airwaves live album. Like, currently the band wrapped up the tour, they're on break. I hope they're taking a nice long couple months off. I'm hoping this year, perhaps they still enjoy some downtime, do a couple festival shows here and there. Mark's got the book. I'm sure Tom is stoked to be working on a movie or something with To the Stars. I guarantee you he's got something going on. But I still hope that Angels and Airwaves live album sees the light of day. And I was just looking at an old conversation I had with Aaron Rubin on the podcast, and it was like, it was done then. So I'm hoping that perhaps that was just delayed due to the Blink excitement, Blink new album, and maybe we'll end up seeing that. I was cracking up. There was those photos floating around of Angels and Airwaves, and Mark was there too at some sort of either Blink, or I think it was more or less a management Christmas party or something. And there's that picture of Angels and Airwaves. I haven't seen those dudes together, all four, with Rabano and Alon and James, since that Lifeforms era, really, a couple years back. And here they are looking all sharp in their suits. And I was just thinking, this looks like the front cover of an acapella album. Angels and Airwaves acapella, bring it on. I'll take anything. I feel like I am right on the verge of another Angels and Airwaves like heavy kick. I go through these little cycles. I don't know if you guys do, but I'll just get in the zone of like, I'm either hardcore on a specific Blink album, or I'll bounce to like, I am all in on Plus 44 this week, or Angel. It's been a little bit on Angels, honestly. I've been such in like a current Blink mood that I haven't really dug into the past too much. And I feel like I'm just right at that point where I'm getting ready to go like super heavy into Angels and Airwaves again. The top 5 One More Time songs. Let me take a drink of water real quick. I've been talking for an hour. Jesus Christ. Top 5 One More Time songs from this era. There is a video version of this up on the YouTube channel. If you go over there, please subscribe, check it out, drop a like, do whatever you do. The top 5, I thought about this long and hard. I listened to them all. This is taking into account One More Time Part 2. This is taking into account all 27 tracks that Blink-182 blessed us with over the past 2 years. And coming in at number 5, this is the one that I think shocks folks the most, and that is See You. And See You is just an incredible song. This was one of the first 2 really like extra tracks we got shortly after the One More Time official release. We got this one and Cut Me Off. And See You, to me, just from the beginning, was just such a rad song. And I think of all the songs from this era, I think this is the one that really is the most like Dogs Eating Dogs era-ish, in that it's a little bit Angels heavy. Like, it does kind of sound like this could be an Angels and Airwaves song, just like a lot of those Dogs Eating Dogs one. It's very Tom heavy. However, what's great about this is you have Mark in there. They're going back and forth. They're finishing each other's sentences. Travis, it's one of those times on the songs, and it reminds me of the Neighborhoods era and the Dogs era, where Travis's drums and just what he's pulling off are just such recognizable and memorable riffs. And yes, a lot of times like Travis is going crazy, amazing drummer, but when I think back to like the Neighborhood songs and even Untitled and Boxcar is really where it first started, but it's like Travis is really making just as recognizable riffs on the drums as the fucking guitars, which a lot of drummers do not or cannot do. So I love See You. I think the drumming in that doom, da 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 da, doom, doom, da 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 da, like just so memorable to me when I think about all of these songs. I have See You at number 5. Number 4, this is from One More Time Part 2. This song is fucking amazing. It is All in My Head. And of all of the songs that we've gotten from these 3 dudes since they've been back together, this is the one that to me just has the most pure and just happy summer Blink vibes that I can possibly feel. And when I listen to this, it just makes me so happy that wherever this was in the writing process, I thought this would be a newer song. Mark had said that it was one of the first ones. In fact, I think he said it was the first one, but Aaron had said No Fun was the first one, so who knows? But regardless, the fact that in 23 or 24, these dudes can get together and still write a song like this that just sounds to me sonically like a feel-good, take off your pants and jacket song is just incredible to me. And it's one of those things, like when the chorus kicks in, it's just that, it's the aggressiveness and like the punch of the chorus and just the delivery of the lyrics and the melody. It's just so fucking good. So from the second I heard this, when I was thinking, oh my God, this has to be a newer one, because I can't fathom this not making the original track list, especially being 17 songs or whatever the first OG release is. So this one I have at number 4. Love this song, still listening to it quite a bit. Number 3, and this is where I had mentioned on a previous podcast I was trying to do a top 3 One More Time era. I don't even think part 2 was out yet. I was trying to do top 3 One More Time songs with the dude Esteban from Blink-182 Chile. We never had a chance to pull it off. And I think at that time I said, this is so easy for me. It's so easy. And I don't know if it's as easy for you all. Yell at me if not. But when I think to that original track list, there are 3 that just stand out so far and above and beyond the others. And at number 3, I have Turpentine. Tom says them both ways on the same exact song. This one, I think from a creative perspective, just really pushes the boundaries of Blink. It's very experimental, just how it's put together, how it kind of transitions, especially into that bridge. It completely switches gears. And really the best way I can put it is just as far as songwriting, it takes me back to Untitled vibes from the sense that they can do whatever. It does not have to be pop punk. It does not have to be certain chord progression. It doesn't have to be certain tones. The song can go wherever they want to go. And I think this is a great example of just a current Blink getting together and putting together exactly what they want to do with no outside influence, nothing that they do not want to do. I think this song is incredible. I'm bummed that it did not make the last One More Time tour set list. I think it was on the radar as a possibility, as an alternate. However, it definitely wasn't played at the shows I went to. I don't recall seeing it at any of them on that stretch. This song rules. At number 2, I have Anthem Part 3. And lyrically, this song is one of the more powerful ones on the entire album. And this is one that I think Tom just really, really shines on as far as lyrically. And this is what you can kind of grow to expect out of Tom a lot of times is when you get serious, Tom, and he's talking about really overcoming either your own challenges or issues or self-doubt. And it's really empowering in the sense that it's like, my hope, the way I interpret it, my hope shit ends here tonight. It's like, put your foot down and instead of dreaming, like make your dream become a reality. Like you can fucking do it. It's fine. Like it's going to be okay. Do what you got to do is kind of my takeaway that I get out of it. The first time that I heard this song, I had goosebumps. That bridge is incredible. It slows down. Perfect moment to let Mark and his deeper voice shine. And then he just screams, "No one gave a fuck that you," which is just such a perfect Mark line. Kind of his dark sense of humor on life and death. And you think it's over. And then it just fucking goes so heavy on the way out, which is insane. And it was exactly at that moment where I'm like, man, these dudes they're back. And this album is going to rule. So that is an easy number 2 for me. And as it should be. I know when I saw that track list and I saw Anthem Part 3, that was probably one of like the hypest points of this whole lead up for me, because I knew if they're going to name something that, and it's following Anthem Part 2, one of my favorite Blink songs of all time, it better be a banger. And being an opener and being named that, I knew some heat had to be on its way, and it was. It's actually interesting. If you go back and listen to my conversation with Aaron Rubin, he was the one who named it, of all things, which is nuts. Okay, coming in at number 1, this was simple for me. And it was the banger that I wanted. It was the banger that I needed. We had Edging. We had One More Time. And yeah, Edging grew on me quite a bit, like incredibly catchy. One More Time, I mean, I fucking bawled, like cried like hell watching that video. Cried doing a podcast. That's one of the things I didn't even mention, or maybe that was a year prior, I guess, but wept on the podcast. But I still wanted that heat. Like, what's the banger? I mean, you all know me. Like, I want the aggressive, riffy stuff. And More Than You Know is when my jaw just hit the floor. And that slow start with the piano, Travis going ham on the double kicks, just insane. And I think back to the Neighborhoods era, and I liken it to Hearts All Gone. When I think back to that, yeah, it's like you have Wishing Well, you have Up All Night. I did like that song a lot, still do to this day. But Hearts All Gone is like the absolute banger that I listen to and revisit quite often, and that I think back to that era, like that's the one I want to go to. And this is that song for me. More Than You Know is amazing. I think lyrically, that second verse from Mark is my favorite set of lyrics on the entire album. He says, "I shook all the leaves from your tree and left you with nothing." And then he talks about like the ivy is starting to creep. It grows through the awning. Like, to me, that's such a beautiful picture he paints, like dark, but beautiful, poetic way of putting it, where it's like just something creeping into your mind is the way that I interpret it. I shook all the leaves from your tree and left you with nothing. That's a hoppus. That is something that it is so simple when you think about it. However, nobody's ever said it and you've never heard it before. And when you do hear it, it paints a perfect picture in your mind. It's not him saying, "I left you, I hurt you, didn't want to be around you." It's, "I shook all the leaves from your tree and left you with nothing." And that picture it paints is just beautiful. I mean, it's just such a dark, poetic way to put stuff. And that's the type of stuff that I love from Mark and from Blink, is just really getting into kind of the deeper poetic side of things, as opposed to some of the more feel good, got the girl songs or missed out on the girl song, stuff like that. It just, there's different levels to Blink, and there's different types of vibes and different types of styles, and they're one of the few bands that they can pull them all off, which is awesome. But the ability to be comfortable with that in this era, I think, is awesome. We saw that throughout this whole album, even including the part 2 is sonically, it is all over the place. There's a little bit of something for everybody, from like a feel good, more or less like pop punk radio song, like a Fell in Love, to like a Boxcar Racer sounding song with Terrified, like truly something for everybody from this era, which is amazing. So those are my top 5. 5 CU, 4 All in My Head, 3 Turpentine, 2 Anthem Part 3, 1 More Than You Know. Be curious to hear yours. Last thing, I've been talking longer than I thought I would. I'm going to lose my voice. I'm going to lose it before Christmas. Top 5 albums of the year. Every year of the podcast, I keep saying I want to do this, and this is where I definitely want to hear yours, because I'm really trying to branch out and like listen to different music. I know I get in the zone sometimes. It's just like creature of habit, like you like what you like, and I'll just listen to Blink, Alkaline Trio, Neck Deep, Newfound Glory, and just over and over and over. And I do like discovering other bands. So if there's an album, regardless of the genre, that you think I would dig, please let me know, and I'm happy to do so. Coming in at number 5, and I'll just put these, like, I hate to even cap it as top 5 like pop punk albums, but these just happen to fit into that. I will start with an honorable mention, and I will say I do like the new Linkin Park album. I almost put out a video on this, but I know there's like some controversy surrounding the new singer and some of that shit. And I'm like, I'm not even getting into this shit. But I will say, at the surface level, probably just like a lot of you, I was very skeptical. To me, Linkin Park is a band that I feel like I kind of grew up with, at least as far as those first 2 albums were very important to me. The Hybrid Theory and Meteora were just like huge albums as far as like inspirations to me early on when I was playing in a band and playing guitar. And I think my takeaway looking back on that stuff is like really Chester's screams and the emotion that was being portrayed throughout those songs was honestly like him and Kurt Cobain are the two, thinking back, where it's like it was okay to be like angry and like express yourself in music that way. And that was something that was very appealing to me early on, is just, letting it out. Like, no pun intended. I think they have a song called that, but it's like, let it out. And like, it's okay. And you can feel the pain and you can hear the pain. And I think everybody knows that Chester is irreplaceable, really. And really, when I was thinking about it, it's not too dissimilar to the Skiba situation, where it's like the fan base can be divided. Do you continue? Do you not? Obviously, drastically different circumstances, so I won't try to compare it too much. But it was just interesting to me enough that I almost put together a video on it. I think I talked about it on a Twitch stream not too long ago, but I was open-minded. I will say, after Meteora, Linkin Park had kind of fallen off for me. I didn't follow them too closely. I did not like the last album that much. I mean, I went back since then, since this new album dropped, and I re-listened to all of their stuff. And there was a couple albums in there that was like, man, I don't know that I even ever listened to these in full. Just different direction. Again, I like the harder, screamier stuff that was mixed with hip hop elements, and it seemed that maybe they were going a little bit away from that, which is fine. They're artists; they should grow and do what makes them happy and that they're passionate about. But I was kind of shocked going back and listening to it, and then I will say, ever since Chester passed, I just couldn't listen to it. I couldn't, and it sucks because it's like, man, it's like if somebody passes away, the last thing that you would think is that would cause folks to like have too much pain to be able to listen to your art or whatever. I'm sure he wouldn't want that, or anybody who either kills themselves or dies tragically or just dies, period. Like, you probably, if you ask those folks, you probably wouldn't hear from them that like, oh, I don't want anybody to ever listen to my stuff again. But I found myself, whenever he passed, ironically, it was right around the time they were supposed to play with Blink. There was a whole Linkin Park thing, which I was talking to my Blink friend in real life the other day. I'm like, man, how are we not going to that? Because he's a big Linkin Park fan. Like, Chester went to his high school. And I was just like, man, right after he passed, I couldn't listen to it. It was too hard. And I really had not listened to Linkin Park in the 7 or so years since his passing. Which is kind of wild. And so when I heard the announcement, I think like a lot of folks, you're just like, man, I don't know. Like, how do you replace that? And since then, throwing out political views or religious views or whatever, like, I'm trying to be fair, I guess, just based purely on the music and whether I enjoy it. The first song I was like, man, it's a pretty good song. Like, on the surface, like the first 2 songs I really dug. There was the third one that was more or less a solo, like slower song of hers. I did not think that was the right choice for a single. I don't think they did any favors on that. I don't know what the numbers look like or how their actual fan base responded to it. Because again, I'm such a casual. It's weird. I talk about this sometimes. It's like, it's almost hard to envision other fan bases, I guess, having the equivalent of like a big fucking nerd like me with like a Linkin Park podcast. I'm like, what would they think about it? Their opinion matters more than me, but I'm just babbling here. But the overall takeaway, once the album dropped for me, like, I listened to it once, I'm like, it's fine. And then I played it again. I'm like, man, I can't stop listening to this album. Like, I listened to the album like over and over, so much so that it ended up being like one of my top albums. So I think at the end of the day, as an honorable mention, I will list it. I don't think that's pop punk per se. I don't even know what they fall under. What is it, like nu metal or something? Who knows? Genres are supposedly dead these days. But yeah, I don't know. It was really interesting to me just thinking about that and kind of how it could be related to Blink and the split fan base. And since then, I've had some of their interviews pop up on my feed, and a couple of the things that had stood out to me was, Mike at one point, he was saying that, yeah, obviously the band is crushed, and you reach a point where it's like, man, your whole life is Linkin Park, and you feel like it's taken away from you. And I couldn't help but kind of think about Mark and Travis, and like, Mark fucking loves Blink. Like, Mark has loved Blink since day one, and then you get in a situation where it's like somebody doesn't want to do it or can't commit or whatever. And the thing that Mike said that stood out to me is he said, draw a circle, and in that circle, list 2 or 3 things that define you. Family, is it football team, whatever. And he said, for me, I would write down Linkin Park. And I couldn't help but think about, if you ask Mark, draw a circle and list your 3 things that define you. I guarantee you Blink would be in there. I was trying to think to myself, I'm like, Jesus Christ, what would I do? Like, what are you guys doing? Draw a big circle. 182 News. Blink, family. It's interesting. It's fucking weird to think about. But, when I started thinking about, look, they know that he's irreplaceable. I think of all the ways to go about it. Like, I think if they would have picked a random dude, probably wouldn't have gone over that well. Sonically, like, yeah, she's got some gnarly screams. I didn't know her prior. So I think it's like, if there's a way to do it, that's probably the only way to go about it. You know, they had waited 7 years, and my understanding, one of the things that I would still like to know is, like, I don't know if Chester wrote all of his lyrics. I mean, I know Linkin Park existed for a couple years before Chester was even in it, which is kind of fascinating to me. I need to find a Linkin Park podcaster to chat with this about. And I don't know, man. At the end of the day, I was like, life's too short to be like angry at a band. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, people, if you don't want to go to the shows or you don't want to listen to the music, like, who gives a fuck? I think back to the Skiba era and some of the hatred amongst the fan base and just kind of how gnarly it would get. Even when you think about like members in the press and stuff. And I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, if this makes them happy, or perhaps it's therapeutic for them to play these songs and be able to get back on a stage to do what they were born to do, even going along with that, like, if they're playing shows and it gives us, the fans or their fans, the ability to get out and go catch a show and be brought back to a time, maybe a simpler time with live music, with the live music that reminds them of Meteora or something like that dropping, like, who cares? Like, that's awesome. Like, why wouldn't people want to do that or be able to do that? You know, I couldn't help but think about, like, what if I took my daughter to a show and she was inspired by that, or people taking their kids to these shows. Same shit happens with Blink and all these bands. It's really cool. So that's a very long way of getting that out of my system, but no, I'm fine with it, I feel like. And I do enjoy that album. Close number 6/5 for me would probably be that, but being as these are pop punk focused, I'm going to stick with the 5. Coming in at number 5, I've got Sum 41, Heaven and Hell. I enjoyed this album. I will say, like, I'm not the biggest Sum 41 stan in the world. I think, like a lot of folks, like Fat Lip, they were on my radar. I've always respected them as more or less pop punk with hints of metal in there. But this album was pretty good to me. Like, it takes a lot for me to sit down and listen to a full album. I did enjoy this. And the fact that they are able to go out on their own terms on this tour, I think is great. I want to read Derek's book. I haven't had a chance to. Maybe that's something I should ask Santa Claus for. Number 4, this is another band that, while I've always known, it's not a band that I really followed extensively or kept up with. And that's The Story So Far. Their album was I Want to Disappear. There was a song on there, Watch You Go, and another song called Big Blind, that when this came out, I just could not stop listening to. Like, I just got my Apple Replay, and by the way, I love looking at people's Apple Replays. I know everybody posts them, and it's almost like a running little joke of like, nobody gives a fuck about your Apple Replay. I'm like, yeah, I do. So send them all my way. I love it all year. It's like stupid fucking reels and cats and political posts. And it's the fucking Apple Replay or Spotify Recap, whatever it's called, that just sets people off. Nobody gives a fuck about your Apple Replay. Oh, really? You think I care about your Pomeranian 7 posts a week? My God. This is how I discover new music. Jesus Christ. Number 4, The Story So Far. Love this album. When I listen to this, I just got such great vibes from it. And their previous work is not stuff that I revisit or dig into. I feel like that era of pop punk was just like a little bit behind me. I'm a little bit older, and it's just not a scene or set of bands. You know, when you get into like Real Friends and like State Champs, like even early Neck Deep, I love it now. But at the time, I was not like, they were not on my radar. They call them like almost like that Tumblr era, which, I mean, I've seen Tumblr, but I was never on there or understood it. So this album rules, though. And I also think because of Parker and No Pressure, one of my favorite bands, it probably opened my eyes up a little bit more to give it a fair shot and dig into it. That album rules. Coming in at number 3, I debated on putting this in the countdown because technically I do think the band thinks about this stuff as B-sides or B-cuts. And that is One More Time Part 2. And I really want to pick the band's brain on, what defines like something being part two versus kept for an EP or kept on a shelf for a future release or whatever. However, I had to put it on here, being a Blink podcast, and then obviously just listening to it a ton. Like, this was in my top 5 albums this past year. I'm still very much that type of nerd. I do the same shit with Cali. I do not listen to them front to back as far as like the 27 tracks in a row. When I listen to One More Time Part 2, I'm clicking on the one with them as babies on the front or kids, and I'm listening to those 10 tracks. If I want One More Time OG, I'm clicking on the other album art and I'm listening to those 17 tracks. This is one that I love, obviously, and I think in the band's mind, it's truly leftover material, at least a lot of it. I think we're still trying to understand on a couple songs when they were written. But overall, just extremely solid release or solid extra set of songs that we got out of them. I think All in My Head is easily the standout for me. Can't Go Back, I love. No Fun is fun. So yeah, I got that at number 3. Number 2, my boy Matt Skiba, Alkaline Trio, Blood, Hair, and Eyeballs. I was very curious to hear what Matt would do next after obviously stepping away from Blink, or not being in Blink anymore. I loved their last album, Is This Thing Cursed? I believe that was 2018. I'm still up in the air on which one of those albums I prefer, the newer one or that one. Probably that one, but I will say this is a very, very solid release. I'm stoked that Adam is now in the band. I wish I had a chance to catch them live. I'm hoping this tour of theirs kind of stretches into a year 2, because I need some Alkaline Trio in my life. But this album rules from the very get-go, and that Bad Time song, man, I listened to that probably 200 times. Just such a good song, and I'm so grateful that everyone's back at home and like writing just the most authentic, genuine music that they want in 2024. Like, it's awesome. Coming in at number 1, this is easily album of the year for me, and it won by a landslide. It's like my top 5 songs. It's the top album. It's the top artist I've listened to all year. And it is that Neck Deep self-titled album. And I'll shout it from the rooftops. This album is fucking fire. And you listen to this and you hear folks that were inspired by New Found Glory and Blink early. We're talking like late 90s New Found and Blink. And they're not ripping it off. They're doing this from a fresh, unique perspective, and it's incredible. So check out that album if you haven't. I cannot wait to hear more out of them, and I just cannot say enough how rad those dudes are. If you get a chance to see them live, they put on an incredible show. If you get a chance to do like a meet and greet or something like that or whatever, like just the kindest dudes. So support rad bands. That's my takeaway for the year. If you have the chance to get out, catch a show, buy a vinyl, like meet people, say what up. Like, to me, that's always just the coolest part of the year, is just like getting out, seeing live music, and just really like engaging with bands, especially like the smaller bands that actually really, really need the support. And if you buy a t-shirt, it means a lot to them, and that type of thing. So that is it for the end of the year podcast that I'm going to drop. Went on much longer than expected. I really, really appreciate everybody's support and listening to the podcast. It is always a pleasure hanging out with you all, whether it's in the car or the gym or overnight up with a baby or whatever. It's just really cool, and I'm hoping that we can keep it going. So as I mentioned earlier, if there is anything that you want to do to support the podcast, this is the time that I do drop that link in the description, and anything is appreciated and goes towards either candy or hosting fees. So that's it for me. Everybody have a great holiday season, and we will chat soon. Thanks.